Gather round and welcome back to another edition of Todd Talks College Football. And today, folks, we're going to break down the ACC win projections against the books. FD and DK is how we refer to them, probably on your phone in an app, just waiting for you for this video so you can see where there's some money to be made in the ACC this year. And let me tell you, there's a lot of mediocrity about to occur here in this league. And guess what? The betting lines are set for that. So we'll see if we can get these teams just a little bit over the 6-6 mark to see where we can get a few winners in our, again, entertainment purposes only video, just so you can be informed if you do decide to look at the betting app. Start with the Boston College Eagles because they're at the top of the alphabet in this conference, folks. And the BC, led by Bill O'Brien in his second year here up there in Boston. And I think we're going to see another pretty average season coming out of the Eagles. So the over-under on this Boston College 2025 season is 5.5 wins, and both books agree. 5.5 wins is the number to beat here for the Eagles. And I believe we are looking at a team that is just going to cross the finish line at 6-6, just beating the 5.5 book line. And we've got teams like Michigan State on the road. They got Clemson coming in. They're going to Louisville, Notre Dame, SMU, Georgia Tech. Those 3 games at home. I don't think they can win those 3 games this year at home. And they got at Syracuse, Connecticut, which could be tricky, Cal, at Stanford, and Fordham. So this is a really strong 6-6 team. The line is 5.5. I'm liking Bill O'Brien's production up there in Boston College, and a few more years he'll get some more players. You might get a 8-4, but solid 6-6 team, I think, coming out of Chestnut Hill. All right, let's move on to Berkeley, California, where we have the Cal Golden Bears, and most definitely the wrong conference here in the ACC. All right, the Cal Bears are bringing in Devin Brown, transfer from the Ohio State University this year. Couldn't beat out Sands or Lincoln Keyholes, so he decided to transfer, and I think this might be an interesting pickup for Cal and could be a pretty decent little quarterback out there in Berkeley. The win over underline for Cal is 5.5. Again, both books agree here, and I think we're sitting again right on the cusp of hitting this over at 6-6 for Cal. They're coming off a 6-7 season. They start at Oregon State. They can get that win. It's going to go a long way in getting over that. They got to go to they got Minnesota at home. They're going to Boston College, Duke at home, North Carolina at home, Virginia on the Virginia Tech, Virginia at Louisville, at Stanford in the game, or the big game, excuse me, not the game, the big game, and then SMU on the last week of the season to finish it off for the Bears. Again, I think a 6-6 season, if they beat Oregon State to start the year. If they don't beat Oregon State, then you'll know real quick that you lost that bet because they'll probably only get 5 wins. So the Cal Golden Bears, exciting team here with Devin Brown coming in. See if they can put together something that at least gets them to the ville of mediocrity. Well, let's move on to Death Valley, Clemson, South Carolina, folks. The Clemson Tigers are my number 1 team going into the season. Yes, I do believe they have what it takes to get to a national championship run, the Final Four. We'll see if they can pull it out from there, but this team has a lot of pieces coming back, and they are going to be a formidable opponent for everybody that they play this year, starting out with LSU at home. They have Georgia Tech on the road. They're at North Carolina, at Boston College, SMU at home, Duke at home, Florida State at home, at Louisville, Furman, and finishing the season with the Gamecocks of South Carolina. So they're sandwiched their SEC games with an ACC schedule, and they have a 9.5 win total on the books here for both FD and DK. And I think this is a lock to get over 9.5 wins, 10 at the minimum, probably 11, could go 12-0. Who knows where Dabo can take this team? But I do think over 9.5 is a very, very good bet here for the Clemson Tigers in 2025. Let's move up the road a little bit to Durham, North Carolina, and the Duke Blue Devils. Manny Diaz is, his second year coming in here to Duke? And they had a good season last year at 9-4 for Duke. And I think, they could, I don't think they're going to get to 9-4, but I think they can get close. We have an over-under projection here on both books at 6.5 wins for the Duke Blue Devils. And how are we going to get them there? Well, they have two extremely tough games in their first 3 weeks, and that's Illinois coming in to them and on the road to Tulane. And if they could split those games, that would be a great thing for the Duke Blue Devils. They also have NC State at home, at Syracuse, at Cal, Georgia Tech at home, at Clemson, at Connecticut, Virginia, at North Carolina, and Wake Forest. That's a 6.5 win total for the Duke Blue Devils. If they can get one of those two wins in that first 3 weeks against Illinois or Tulane, I think this is a 7-5 football team. They drop both those games. It's a 6-6 football team. 6.5 is the bet. I think they can get there, but I'm kind of wishy-washy here at 6.5 on the Duke Blue Devils. I think they're a 7-5 team. We'll see if Manny can get this team together in time to beat Illinois and then roll into Tulane and beat what's going to be extremely good football team at Tulane this year. I'm kind of wishy-washy on the Duke Blue Devils. I think I'm going to stick away from it at 6.5 wins as the over. All right, let's go down to Tallahassee. The Florida State Seminoles coming off the worst year I've ever seen in my life for the Seminoles at 2-10. And man, it just went to crap early and often. And it could again this year, starting off with Alabama. Now, there's a lot of chatter in Seminole country that this is going to be a good team, and they're going to, new Doak Walker revamp opening this year. It's first game Alabama. Can they hang with them? Thomas Castellanos, who couldn't hold the job at Boston College, thinks he's going to be the savior at Florida State. We'll see. It can go either way here. The betting lines are a little mixed on this. One has them at 7.5. One has them at 6.5 on the over-under. I'm looking at this team at 7-5, folks. They got to start off with the aforementioned Alabama Crimson Tide. They got East Texas A&M and Kent State win-win. They're going to Virginia. Probably a win. They got Miami coming in to Tallahassee. Be tough to beat Miami this year. They're going Pittsburgh at Stanford, Wake Forest at Clemson, not winning that one. Virginia Tech at NC at Florida. I think there's five losses for sure. 7.5 on the one, 6.5 on the other. I'd take the DK and the 6.5 and go over with the Florida State Seminoles, but I'd stay under the 7.5 line on the FD. That's where we're at with Florida State. We'll see. It'll be real interesting in that first game. If they can hang with Alabama, they could be a player, but it's going to be tough. Alabama's going to come out with a real nasty attitude this year and see if they can knock the Seminoles back into a tailspin that they got into last year after losing their opener. The Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, they're up next on our list here. And the over-under on this team is 7.5 wins. And folks, I'm telling you, this is the best value in the ACC this year at 7.5 wins. This is a 9-3 team for sure. 8-4 at the very worst. Could get to 10-2. We'll see how they do. But I know for sure 7.5 wins is definitely under where this team is going to be at 8 wins for sure, probably 9, and we'll see where they can go from there. They got Colorado on the road on a Friday night, just a couple weeks away. So excited to see this game. Gardner-Webb, Clemson at home. Could they beat Clemson? If they do, that would be amazing, and it would go a long way. I think they could, but we'll see how they can pull out those first couple games and where they are. Temple at home, at Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, at Duke, Syracuse, at NC State, at Boston College, Pittsburgh, and Georgia. I'm telling you, folks, there's a lot of wins in that schedule if they can keep playing the right way that they were playing late in the season last year. And then, of course, they got Georgia in a neutral site game for some reason. I'd make Georgia roll in to Atlanta and to the old Ramblin' Wreck Stadium and make them play there, but they're playing them in the big Mercedes Dome or whatever the hell it's called. So we got Georgia at the end of the season. I like this team over 7.5 wins for sure. Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets return a starter at quarterback, running back, one of their best receivers back. This team is loaded for bear and ready to compete in the ACC and maybe even for a championship in the ACC. Next up, we're going to go to Louisville. The Cardinals. Yes, the Cardinals. They've got Miller Moss transfer from the USC Trojans into town and see and if they can replace last year's QB with a better quarterback that can get them their over 8.5 wins, which is what both lines have them at. And I think that is a real tough doing at 8.5. Last year, they went 9-4 with the bowl game. This year, I think they're 8-4, probably at the best 9-3, but I don't see it, folks. We've got Eastern Kentucky. They got James Madison coming in. Don't sleep on James Madison on a Friday night in Louisville. Funny things can happen there. Bowling Green at Pittsburgh, Virginia at Miami, Boston College at Virginia Tech, Cal, Clemson, SMU at SMU in Kentucky. I think there's at least 3 losses. Knowing Louisville, they'll pull out a loss they shouldn't get. It'll be 8-4, 8.5's the line. I'm probably saying the under. This is a real tough pick in this conference, though. You could go to 9 wins. You could get to 8 wins. It's right there, folks. 8.5. It's tough. I'd probably stay away from the Louisville Cardinals on this line. All right, up next, the Miami Hurricanes and Carson Beck coming to town trying to replace number 1 pick Cam Ward in last year's NFL draft, and we'll see if they can duplicate this 10-3 season they had last year or maybe even a little better. The over-under on this team is 9.5, and I told you earlier, folks, Clemson was at 9.5, and that was a lock. I'm not so sure here if this is the lock at 9.5. It'll be tough. They got Notre Dame at home Sunday night, Labor Day weekend, big game. Can they win that? If they can, this could be a 10-win team. If they don't, it's probably a 9-win team. They got a couple softies, Bethune-Cookman, USF. They do have Florida coming in to Miami this year. I think they can beat the Gators because the Gators will be coming off of an LSU game the week before on the road. So it'll be a challenge. They go at Florida State. I think they can get the Seminoles this year. They got Louisville. Toughie right there. It's a Friday night in Louisville. I already told you crazy things can happen in Louisville. Stanford at SMU, Syracuse, NC State, Virginia Tech, and at Pittsburgh. This team is real close to 10 wins. It's real close to 9 wins. It's at 9.5. I don't understand how the Clemson's not at 10 at least, and this is at 9.5, but I like the Clemson bet at 9.5 more than I like the Hurricanes at 9.5 here in this position. I'm going to give them a 9-3 season down there in Coral Gables, Florida. Now we move up to Raleigh, North Carolina, in the Wolf Pack of North Carolina State. The line has this team at 6.5. They were 6-7 last year. This is a team that's right on the verge of a breakout. It could get over 6.5. Let's take a look at it. They got East Carolina, Virginia, at Wake Forest, at Duke, Virginia Tech, Campbell, at Notre Dame, at Pittsburgh, Georgia Tech, Miami of Florida, Florida State, and North Carolina. This is going to be a toughie, folks. I think they're right on the verge at 7-5, just over the 6.5 number. I do think this is a 7-win football team this year down there in Raleigh. And I'm going to say the over at 7-5 on the line at 6.5 win total for the week. All the buzzes surrounding Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and Bill Belichick, and what will his team look like in the world of college football? And let me see, they've got a lot of work to do this year, and we'll see if Belichick is up to the challenge. He's got to replace a lot of players. He's got 7 offensive starters coming back, 5 defensive starters coming back from a team that went 6-7 last year. They start off on Monday night of Labor Day weekend. The whole world will get to see Bill Belichick against TCU. And will he get that first win? And I got it as a toss-up here, folks. This is going to be the game that decides whether or not they can win 7.5 games, is where the book has them, or if they're going to fall just under. This TCU game could be the difference here. They got Charlotte at Charlotte. They're going to Charlotte for some odd reason. Richmond at UCF, Clemson at home, at Cal, Virginia, Syracuse, Stanford, West Virginia, or Wake Forest on the road, Duke at NC State. This could be an 8-win team. This could be a 7-win team. This could be a 6-win team at 7.5. I'm going to say the under's probably the call here. They're running up against a good team in TCU, returning starting quarterback. They'll probably be a little bit more ready to go in week 1. I think they'll lose that game probably, and they'll fall to 7-5. If they win that, who knows what Belichick could do. This could also turn into a crap show by week 4 when they're going on the road after week 5, I guess, would be at Clemson or Clemson at home. So I don't know. I'm going to say 7.5 is just slightly too much this year for the North Carolina Tar. All right, let's roll up to Steel Country and the Pitt Panthers and see if they can get an over-under of 6.5 wins this year. They went 7-6 last year. They are returning their quarterback from last year, who was pretty good. We'll see. With this schedule, they start off with Duquesne, Central Michigan, at West Virginia. Could Rich Rodriguez get revenge for that 2007 loss before he left originally from West Virginia? Louisville at home, Boston College at home, at Florida State, at Syracuse, NC State, at Stanford, Notre Dame, at GT, Georgia Tech, and Florida at home. I think this is a 6-6 football team, folks, and 6-5 is the over-under on this. I'm going to probably stay away from the Pitt Panthers. They could pull one of those wins out. They could lose 2 of those games they should win. Who the hell knows? But it's too close at 6.5. If anything, I'm going with the under here on the Pitt. All right, from Pittsburgh to Dallas, we move. And the SMU Mustangs coming off the Cinderella season last year, making it in to the playoffs and almost playing well. But they've got Kevin Jennings coming back, and they got 7 offensive players around them, 5 defenders coming to them. 8.5 is the over-under line here for the SMU Mustangs, and we'll see. East Texas A&M, and then Baylor at home, at Missouri State, at TCU, Syracuse, Stanford, at Clemson, at Wake Forest, Miami, at Boston College, Louisville, and at Cal. I see 3 losses on that schedule with a quick look, and I'm going to give them a loss with Miami. I'm going to give them a loss at Clemson. I'm going to give them a loss at Baylor. Could be a win there. Could lose at Boston College. Tricky place to play up there, especially in November. 8.5. I think this is a 9-3 football team this year, folks. So I'm going to go ahead and ride Kevin Jennings, see if he got better from last year's playoff game, and see if we can get this kid to 9-3 this season, which would be a spectacular season for SMU, but we'll keep him out of the playoffs. 9-3 is my prediction. 8.5 is the line. I'm going with the over here for the SMU Mustangs. Up next, we're going to Stanford, California, and the Stanford Cardinal. And Frank Reich in his one and only season here, interim coach. He's not coming back next year. and Stanford was 3-9 last year, and we have an over/under win total this year of 3.5. Unfortunately, old Frankie boy here, he pulls the 10th toughest schedule in the country, and it just doesn't get much better for him as we start off at Hawaii, at BYU, on the road to, at home to Boston College, on the road to Virginia, San Jose State, at SMU, Florida State, at Miami, Pittsburgh, at North Carolina, Cal in the big game, and Notre Dame. Folks, that could be 10 losses. Could be 3 wins. 3.5's the number. I don't think the Stanford fighting Frank Reichs are going to be able to get more than 3 wins to beat the 3.5 line here on both books. From Stanford to Syracuse, we move on to Fran Brown in his second year over here with the Qs, and we have a 5.5 on the book win total. Now, remember, this was a 10-3 football team last year. Played really well with Kyle McCord at quarterback, but they're bringing in some new players, new quarterbacks, Steven and Genie from Notre Dame. We'll see how old Steve-O does. He had some good throws last year when he got in that playoff game. But this is going to be a challenging schedule. They start off with Tennessee and Atlanta to start the season. They got Connecticut, which is a good football team this year. Colgate at Clemson. Duke at home at SMU. Pittsburgh at Georgia Tech. North Carolina at Miami. Notre Dame on the road, and finish up with Boston College. You couldn't get much tougher than that, folks. That's got to be the number 5th, 6th toughest schedule in the country. And the Syracuse Orangemen are going down from last year's 10-3. The question is, can they get over 5.5 wins here in this schedule? I think they're a 5-7 team. They're probably no better than 6-6. 5.5's the number. I'm probably going to take the under here for the Orangemen just because of this really rough schedule. I'm thinking under 5.5. They could get to 6, but it's real tricky here. They're trying to give you the hook to take it. I think you stay under. Let's talk about the Virginia Cavaliers coming in this season off of a 5-7 season last year. 4th year for Tony Elliott out there in the program for the Cavaliers, and we'll see if they can get to this 6.5 win total that the books have them at. They start off the season Coastal Carolina, at NC State, William & Mary, Stanford, Florida State, all at home, on the road to Louisville, Washington State at home, at NC, at Cal, Wake Forest, at Duke, and Virginia Tech. That is a really challenging schedule for them. I think, now, it's the 89th roughest schedule probably in the country, but for Virginia, this is going to be a rough schedule. 6.5 is the win total. I don't think they can get over 6. I think they can get to 6. I got them down as 5-7. We'll give them one in there at 6. 6-6. A little bit of improvement over last year's 5-7, but I don't think they're going to get to 7 wins is what it'll take to beat the 6.5 line for the Virginia. Now we move on to Blacksburg, Virginia, and the Virginia Tech Hokies. And one of my favorite teams with their opening Enter Sandman beginning of the game, get you fired up, ready to roll into Lane Stadium and make some noise. The problem is Virginia Tech hasn't been making a lot of noise to match the song. They're coming off a 6-7 season. Last year, they got a 6.5 over/under this year. They got a schedule that looks like they got South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Old Dominion, Wofford, at NC State, Wake Forest, at GT, Georgia Tech, Cal, Louisville, at Florida State, Miami, and at Virginia. And this is a 6-6 team, folks. This line 6.5. I don't see them getting to 7 wins here with this schedule. Maybe they could beat NC State, at Georgia Tech, Louisville, at Florida State, Miami. Maybe they could get those wins. I don't see it. They're not beating South Carolina in the first game. This is a 6-6 football team. I'm taking the under on the Virginia Tech Hokies. Last but not least, we have the Wake Forest Demon Deacons out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And this used to be an exciting team to watch. They're coming off of a 4-8 season, and they don't look to get much better from that. They got 4.5 on the win total this year. Polls agree. And I just don't know that the Wake Forest Deacons can get to 4.5 wins. Kennesaw State, Western Carolina, North Carolina State, GT, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech on the road at Oregon State, SMU, Florida State, at Virginia, North Carolina, Delaware, and at Duke. And that's going to be a lot of L's in that schedule, folks. And I think this is a 3-9, 4-8 football team at best. They got them at 4.5 on the over-under. I'm taking the under here for the Wake Forest Demons. Well, that brings us to the conclusion of the ACC over-under projections for 2025. And my parlay that I think is going to hit in 2025 for the ACC would be Clemson over 9.5 victories, the Georgia Tech Ramblin' Wreck over 7.5 victories, and the Wake Forest Demon Deacons under 4.5 victories. So that's where I think we're going to end up in the ACC. This is a one-horse race, in my opinion, at the top, and that's Clemson, Miami, Georgia Tech, SMU, maybe Louisville running up behind. But I really do think this is Clemson's conference to lose this year. So with that being said, remember, gather round in ALTT.